Behelits. When you think of berserk, you can think of many different visual items that can represent the story. Think of Skull Knight, you could think of Guts' sword, you could think of his silhouette, you could think of Puck, you could think of the brand of sacrifice. The Behelit is up there with all of those. It's one of the things that defines what is unique in dark fantasy with berserk. Taking the body horror and mixing it with dark fantasy along with the apostles, but the Behelits, ever since their first inception on the page, have this very disturbing feel. And still within the story today, Behelits are constantly a source of discussion because of what it is they can do. Right now, we don't know of how many Behelits are out there. There could be hundreds of thousands of Behelits out there in the world, but we do know one is in the pocket of our main character. And based on the rules of how Behelits work, we may see it get used. So for this video, I wanted to talk about that and kind of discuss what it is that this Behelit could mean and where it goes. Before we get into that, we have to discuss the origins of the Behelits, right? We all know that they're used to create an apostle. A human who's gone through some sort of strife, bleeds on it or injures himself and wishes upon it, and through the Behelit can summon the God Hand. Creates a temporal junction in that one place, and it is in that moment the human can sacrifice something very precious to them in order to attain the apostle power that they offer. Most notably, characters are sacrificing the one thing that makes them human. Griffith sacrificing the Band of the Hawk, the Count sacrificed his wife and then again offered to sacrifice his daughter. The other thing that kept him a human, retained his humanity, was his relationship to his daughter. Many different examples, clearly. We know this, and where they come from is technically still a topic of debate and mystery. We know in a certain lost chapter where they technically came from, if that remained canon, and if it later comes up again. But Behelits are sent out into the world, stones of highly spiritual energy, and they're a key to link the physical world to the deeper parts of the astral world, even further than where the God Hand reside. Behelits are also talked constantly about how they can govern fate, and that's the important part that we have to discuss. Behelits have been discussed as such a high piece of causality, a very important, powerful piece of causality, that each Behelit that is created or out into the world is meant to make its way to a group of people. Behelits have that kind of unique attribute that I think maybe Mira got inspiration from, is the One Ring. The One Ring has a will of its own. And the One Ring in Lord of the Rings is always trying to get back to its master. It's always trying to get back to Sauron. But the Behelits, in their case, they have a will of just being there, and through causality and through random chance, they find their way to their next person, or to the person that they're meant to be. Essentially, Slugcount and all the other apostles that used Behelits, they received them when it was time for them to have them. It's very hard to debate about whether or not this is the case, or if it's random chance, and how much is it random chance if it goes somewhere else. But regardless, the Behelits are very powerful in the fact that they can just move about the world, being simply inanimate objects. They could sit in one place for over 200 years, and then one day, the person who picks it up is the one it was meant to go to. That's kind of how it may work. Now, I just have to state before I get into where this Behelit's going that Guts has, I have to actually state, because I noticed this when talking with some viewers, that a lot of people actually don't know the difference between a Crimson Behelit and a normal Behelit. There is actually two different types of Behelits. If you already know this, then you know, but to summarize for the people who don't know, essentially normal Behelits aren't red. Normal Behelits are a kind of greenish or bluish stone-like color. Doesn't look as nice, and it's essentially still has the same features as a normal Behelit. It's got the mouth and the eyes and the nose. But to give you an idea, those Behelits are meant for mere mortals. Any human can use a Behelit. Any human can use those Behelits. Crimson red ones are for those who are qualified to be a part of the God Hand. That's why Griffith's one is red. And that's why when other apostles see it, they recognize it as not just an average Behelit. They see it as the egg that will make their next king. Essentially it was. Now, Crimson Behelits have the same rules. They get to the person it was meant to. At one point, Griffith lost it, and it found its way back to him at the very perfect time, right before the eclipse. Now, with that out of the way, Guts' Behelit is just a regular old Behelit. He had it from the Count, and he's been holding on to it ever since. Also, Puck has found some sort of fascination with it, calling it Betchy, which is like, you know, cool name. Now, at first, Guts had it because he wanted to see if it was possible to use it to summon the God Hand, and with that power, then use it to fight them. I think the reason he never did it, because if he were to call them and he didn't have something to sacrifice or he didn't kill them, then he would die. Second of all, having then encountered the God Hand after the eclipse and trying to fight Griffith and being pushed back without him even touching him, I think made him realize that he isn't strong enough to fight him, and so he truly needs another way. He's been holding on to this Behelit for, we can only assume, many years right now. He essentially still has it to maybe hold it on as a last resort, use in a last case ditch scenario, or something like that. I doubt it in terms of Guts' character because he loathes apostles to such a degree that I don't think he would ever sacrifice his humanity or sacrifice the people around him. But that's not to say it is the case with other people. Many people think that the reason Guts holds onto it is because that Behelit's meant for him, which I don't think is true. I think the Behelit is meant for someone that maybe we've encountered, because that would be insane in terms of the storytelling that's in hand with how Behelits work. It's like having the One Ring slowly get to the characters that we care about or try and get away from the characters we care about. It's having a MacGuffin that has a will of its own. It's not just an inanimate object, it moves in its own way. And so when talking about this Behelit, and we have a list of characters who we know are not with Guts, let's go through the obvious ones. Black Swordsman Party. Who would use this Behelit? That's the question. Many people think Serpico and Farnese are two possibilities in terms of using the Behelit. I would say Serpico is probably the more likely. If Farnese were to pass away and Serpico would use it out of anger to sacrifice something he cared about in order to get revenge of whoever died. And I think it'd be even more interesting if Serpico thought about it, but then Guts convinced him not to do it. But regardless, I don't think any of the main Black Swordsman Party members would use it. We're talking about other ones who are maybe on the outside. Roderick. Man, it'd be pretty shocking to see if Roderick did it, because he's been such a genuine person to our characters. It would seem so unheard of for him to suddenly just choose this power and sacrifice Farnese or someone else just to get this unbelievable power. Now, Farnese's brother, maybe he would do it. Magnifico has always been very selfish, only a comedic way, but there's always a time where anything can turn very dark in Berserk. So Magnifico is a possibility. I don't think Isidro or Shirke would use it. Isidro has his wants, but he wouldn't ever sacrifice his humanity, because him using other people to get strong or being given strength, I don't think is as important to him as having his own strength, especially now that he's built it up over the last couple volumes. He, in his own way, is a fighter, and I think he likes that about himself. I also don't know if the rule against the branded can use the Behelit. Plus, the branded can't be sacrificed. Casca or Guts can't be sacrificed because they're already branded. This is talked about in the slug count kind of temporal junction scene, because he is already branded and meant for someone else. So the characters of Guts and Casca are off the table in terms of being sacrificed, if by another person. Now, I've basically laid out the Black Swordsman Party. It feels like none of them are candidates in my eyes. Maybe some other people have some other theories, and we'll get to that in terms of like the comments. But I really don't think it's someone that we know really, really well. I don't. I think it is cool to have temptation. It'd be great to see scenes of our characters, especially the Black Swordsman Party, be tempted with the power of an apostle. Serpico being tempted after losing Farnese, and then being talked out of it by everyone else, I think would be great, because that just shows that the bond they've all formed. I do think there are more dark things that are going to happen, especially coming up, but I don't think it's our main characters who will fall to that spell, just because the one who warns them and the one who shows the results of being branded is Guts. So who's left? Well, there are a lot of characters that we do know about. Much further out, there's actually a group of people who could use it. Behelits are used to discard people's humanity, so it would fall upon people who are willing to lose it for a greater gain. Now, social status does not dictate how someone can and can't use a Behelit. Someone as rich as the Count used the Behelit. Someone as rich as Ganishka and powerful as Ganishka used the Behelit, for different circumstances, of course. But if you take into account the people who Griffith is surrounded by, who are human, it wouldn't surprise me that someone like Charlotte would use the Behelit, maybe transform herself into an apostle, greater power. I'm not saying that is definite, I'm just saying that Charlotte is someone who I think still sees the world in very black and white. Doesn't really understand too much of the things that are at greater stake, the grey shades of Griffith and all these other characters. I don't think she understands that Griffith may have a side to him that isn't likable. We tell you we know all about that, don't we? I think a lot of people realize this, and Rosine is a character as well. She thought the world was very black and white, and then after sacrificing her parents, still tries to live in a world that's black and white as an apostle. But then it just turns to shades of grey straight away anyway, so it just doesn't work. And I think that's a huge case, especially for maybe Charlotte. Princess Charlotte sees the world like that. And then once it's shattered, even more than it was when in the Golden Age, it'd be a great chance for her to possibly use it. Now that's as if the characters go to Falconia and the Behelit makes its way there, which, hey, it's a possibility. And who's to say that this Behelit isn't for another apostle? It could have been for Zod. Zod could sacrifice something, but of course that would be hard because what does he have to sacrifice that's precious to him? You know, again, the rule with Behelits is that apostles can use it again. They just have to give another sacrifice. Who else? Well, we're forgetting one small little boy, Ricket. Ricket is someone who has seen the awful grittiness of apostles. So he knows that it's probably a bad road to go down, especially if he were to use that Behelit. Especially now knowing the truth about Griffith. But not the people around him. Right now, he's with the remaining Kushan, the Bakiraka, which has Salat. Salat wants to know the truth. He wants to know the truth about apostles. He wants to know the truth about the Hawk. Salat strikes me as someone when he's backed into a corner, he'll take any kind of ability or anything he can to fight back. Guts, look, he'll take help, we know that. But he's not going to fight fire with fire. He's not an apostle. He's trying to make sure he doesn't lose his humanity to a suit of armor. I don't think he's worried about trying to lose his humanity to a little rock in his pocket. But Salat, who's to say that one day we don't come across Ricket again and finally come into contact with Salat? Salat asks to see the Behelit. He wants to learn more about this. It's through such small little actions that the Behelit makes its way to someone who sees and has heard about the stories of eclipses, temporal junctions, apostles, and the God Hand, and you know what, decides, I want in on this. And I can do what Ganishka couldn't do and fight back. Who knows? But he'd have to sacrifice something he cares about. What it would be, I'm not sure. But a character like that strikes me as someone who's willing to lose something in order to gain more. I'm not saying Salat's probably the next Griffith or the next member of the God Hand, but he might be someone who is interested in learning about Griffith for his own means. We don't know. I'd like to think he turns out to be a trustworthy character. We all want to think that about people we don't know, about people we don't know a lot about characters we haven't seen fully fleshed out. But I think a party that Ricket maybe comes across might be a bit more likely. It's possible. It's really hard to try and think of everything because we feel like maybe we've met every character there is under the sun at the moment. But it's not the truth just yet. That Behelit is meant for someone. And maybe there is a loophole that can be found. There is a loophole of using somehow the Behelit on the physical manifestation of Griffith and sacrificing them to God Hand. But it doesn't solve anything. So it'd have to go to a character who thinks it can solve everything. A character who thinks that everything can be fixed with it. It's also interesting of how Behelits are utilized by people who aren't human. Let's look at Skull Knight. Skull Knight ingests all the Behelits he finds and creates the sword of actuation. Now, we don't know if those Behelits are rendered null after being used and ingested by him, or if they're stored all their energy inside him, but at some point, all those Behelits have to go somewhere. Do they go to him in the end of the day, or are they still waiting inside him and on that sword to just go somewhere else? I'm not sure. I don't know if it follows the same rules in terms of the sword. I've looked up and read as much as I can, but that sword still has all this primed evil energy inside of it that can and will go somewhere. Don't know if it's meant to be going to someone, the sword is maybe meant to go to someone, or the energy inside it is meant to harm someone or give them power. But what I think is maybe the Behelits have to go somewhere. They always have a purpose and they always have a place to go. It's interesting because we don't really know a lot too much of Crimson Behelits and whether or not it's the case with them, how many are out in the world, if there are any, especially when there's already 5 God Hand. But it's something that I hope to make in a future video. But all in all, I just wanted to make this video to discuss that and put the theory out there, right? I really do think that the Behelit isn't going to go to anyone in the Black Swordsman party. I think it will be used as a temptation tool. And I think that works best because the Behelit is similar to the One Ring Lord of the Rings. What makes better conflict for characters that is temptation? The Behelit should signify or be applicable to the themes that we think of in the story. And I think the Behelits have that same power of applicability to them. You look at the Behelit and you think this can be used for any means. It can be used to give me power and wealth and everything I want. I just only have to reach out and grab it and give something back in order to get everything I ever wanted. And I think that's what's great about them, the temptation, that power. I really, really want those scenes, I guess. I want characters to be tempted by it, especially because I think it's lied a bit too dormant in that pocket for too long for it not to be used in terms of the story. Whether or not it will, of course, that's totally up to the writers, but we'll see. You know, I just want to make this video and really get the thought out there. And you know what? I think I really want to talk more about Crimson Behelits and God Hand politics because, man, if anything I've learned from the quiz and a couple other videos, that's something that needs to be talked about because it never gets talked about ever. But other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think the Behelits are going to someone specific that we already know? Character we don't know? Possible third party that we already know? A possible apostle that we already don't know about or do know about? Question mark? Please let me know. And also if you thought all Behelits were red, when it turns out they're not, which is kind of crazy. If you didn't know, you're welcome. The more you know. But anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe. I'd appreciate it very much. Or a like. Make sure you hit bell, because if you don't hit bell, Behelit will come to you. Come in the mail. It will be bad. Your parents will be like, I don't know what that is. What is that? That's kind of weird, kid. Kind of cringe, bro, that you have a Behelit in your pocket. Not gonna lie. And that won't be good for anyone, so hit bell. But all in all, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it if you made it to the end. My name's Mugen. As always, have a good one.